There was a time when there were far more cowboys than horses in the Wild West, and to get from town to town, most cowboys had to walk. But what happened to a lone rider who disappeared in the Wild West? Today, we'll find out. No one notices in 1874, traveling by horseback or riding on a stagecoach were two of the most popular methods of transportation for settlers heading out west. But both of these methods were expensive. For many cowboys, walking was the only way they knew how to get from point A to point B. It didn't matter if it was blistering hot or freezing cold. Cowboys would rather walk than pay exorbitant prices to ride in a stagecoach. So it's not surprising that many people walking west ended up being victims of murder, robbery, or worse. Most times their bodies were never found. But how did this happen? And why doesn't anyone notice when someone goes missing in the Wild West? That's a great question. Back then, there were so few people living in the Wild West that it seemed like an endless frontier. There were many settlements with fewer than 100 inhabitants, but sometimes even those small towns could be years apart. In other words, if a cowboy went missing in the Wild West, he might have been walking alone for weeks. During this time, he may have walked right past a settlement without anyone taking any notice. He may have also been dead for weeks before anyone realized he'd gone missing at all. After all, there were no social media platforms back then and phones were rare. If you wanted to reach out and find a friend, you had to hope that they were close enough to your town or settlement to receive your letter. Otherwise, it would take months just to figure out if they were alive or dead. This is exactly what happened to one cowboy named Tom. No one noticed when he disappeared, but soon someone would come looking for him. The sheriff visits his house. Tom wasn't like most cowboys. He didn't travel around much. Instead, he preferred to stay in his house and fix up old boots. People in the town knew him as a hard-working man who was always tinkering in his workshop. But one day, a visitor showed up at his door. It was the local sheriff. When he knocked on Tom's door, no one answered. At first, the sheriff thought maybe Tom was working in his shop. But when he peered inside, he couldn't see anything except tools and half-finished projects. There was no sign of Tom anywhere. Days went by and still no one saw Tom outside his house. Soon, the sheriff decided to investigate further. First, he looked around the house. He examined every room, closet, and cellar. But after hours of searching, he came up empty-handed. Then he went to the neighbors and asked them if they'd seen Tom. They hadn't. No one had seen him since he disappeared from his house. What was going on? Had Tom really vanished into thin air? The sheriff wondered if something horrible had happened to him. Was he lying somewhere in the wilderness, his body slowly being picked apart by vultures? Or did something more sinister befall him? Determined to find answers, the sheriff continued his investigation. The town gathers news of Tom's disappearance spread quickly through the Wild West town. Soon everyone was talking about it. People gathered in the main square, exchanging theories about what might have happened to him. Some said they'd heard rumors that a band of outlaws had been in the area recently. Perhaps they'd kidnapped Tom for ransom. Others argued that there was no evidence to support this theory. They insisted that Tom had simply run away from home. But what did the sheriff think? As the days turned into weeks and still no trace of Tom was found, the townspeople became increasingly uneasy. They began to worry that the same thing might happen to them. What if they, too, would vanish without a trace? Fearful whispers filled the streets as people tried to make sense of the mystery. But the sheriff remained determined to find answers. He put out a call for help, summoning any available lawmen to assist in the search for the missing cowboy. All the while, he kept searching for clues, hoping to catch a break in the case. But what he didn't realize was that the biggest clue was right in front of him the whole time. The search begins. When the news of Tom's disappearance reached the nearby settlements, a group of volunteers decided to join the search party. Among them was Tom's best friend, Billy. Together, they combed through the wilderness, searching for any sign of their missing friend. Days turned into weeks, but there was still no sign of Tom. Hope began to dwindle, replaced by despair. The search party grew tired and eventually went back to their homes. But Billy refused to give up. He continued to look for Tom on his own, following every lead and questioning everyone who might have seen something. As the weeks turned into months, Billy's determination didn't waver. He refused to believe that Tom was gone forever. Then one day, Billy stumbled upon a clue that gave him hope that Tom might still be alive. It was an old boot. It looked similar to one of Tom's boots, but it was covered in dirt and hadn't been worn in a long time. Excited, Billy examined the boot more closely. Sure enough, it was one of Tom's. But how could this be? If Tom had been kidnapped, why would his captor throw away his boot? Or did they take it off during the struggle? Was Tom still alive? Billy wondered. He followed the trail left behind by Tom's boot until he came across an old saloon. It looked abandoned and forgotten, but something about it seemed familiar. Then he remembered. Tom had told him once that he used to work at this very saloon years ago. Could this be where Tom had gone? Before leaving town, Billy cautiously approached the saloon. He pushed open the creaky doors and stepped inside. The cowboy is inside the saloon. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through grimy windows. The place was empty except for one lone cowboy sitting at the bar. He was tall and weathered, his face lined with wrinkles that told stories of a life well lived. His eyes, though, were sharp and alert, betraying his age. Billy approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," he asked, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the saloon. "Have you seen a man around here?" "A friend of mine. He's been missing for months." The cowboy turned slowly, his gaze fixed on Billy. "Can't say I have, stranger," he drawled finally. "This ain't much of a social club anymore. Folks don't stop by much, not since." He trailed off, his eyes distant. "Not since what?" Billy pressed, sensing that the cowboy might know more than he was letting on. The cowboy sighed, running a hand over his leathery face. "Not since the curse," he whispered, his voice low. "This place is cursed." Time has passed before Billy could press further. The saloon doors swung open, letting in a gust of wind that sent shivers down his spine. Two men stepped in, squinting against the dim light. "Heard there might be some company," one of them said, his voice raspy. "Thought we'd drop by and check." The other nodded. "Thought we'd see how things are going." Billy watched them warily as they approached the bar, their eyes gleaming in the gloom. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. "Just passing through," the first man replied with a shrug. "Heard tell of this place. Figured we'd stop and see what's what." Billy frowned, suspicious. "What brings you here?" he pressed. "Same as everybody else, I reckon," the second man drawled. "Heard there's a ghost in this here saloon. Thought we'd come and see if the story's true. Now, they're trapped too." As the men talked, Billy couldn't shake the feeling that they were up to no good. He eyed them suspiciously. Just then, the cowboy at the bar spoke up. "You boys planning on staying for a spell?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Might as well," the first man replied with a grin. "Figured we'd stick around and see if we can't find some excitement." The cowboy nodded slowly. "Well, you found it," he said grimly. "This place ain't safe. Not when the sun goes down." Suddenly, the saloon doors slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through Billy. He scrambled for the doors, but they were locked. Trapped. Now what? The men cursed and pounded on the doors, but their pleas for entry were ignored. Outside, the wind howled and rain began to lash against the windows. Lightning flashed, illuminating the terrified faces of the men inside. The storm was upon them, and there was no escape. The curse was real. Billy huddled in a corner, his heart pounding. The others were cursing and praying, their voices echoing in the confined space. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew heavy with fear. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the storm outside subsided. Dawn was breaking, and with it, a sense of foreboding. The men were trapped in the cursed saloon, and no one knew what the next day would bring. The mystery deepens as the days passed. Billy and the others grew desperate. They searched for a way out, but the doors and windows were locked or boarded up. There was no escape. Hunger and thirst gnawed at them, and fear hung heavy in the air. Then, as if by magic, food and water appeared, left by unseen hands. Every morning, a fresh supply awaited them, enough to sustain them, but never enough to stave off starvation altogether. Whoever was leaving the supplies had clearly made sure they wouldn't starve. But why? Were they being prepared for sacrifice? One day, Billy discovered a hidden passage behind the bar. It led to a tunnel that stretched far beneath the saloon. He explored it cautiously, his heart pounding, but it was a dead end. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the answer to their predicament lay somewhere in the tunnels. Meanwhile, the other men were growing increasingly agitated. They argued and fought, their tempers fraying under the strain of their confinement. But Billy remained calm, determined to find a way out. No one ever leaves the saloon. It's cursed. But the truth is, there's a secret exit. See, when Billy first arrived at the saloon, he noticed a strange symbol carved into the bar. He'd seen that symbol before, but he couldn't place it. But now he remembered. It was the symbol of the Native American tribe that once lived in this area. And legend had it that they buried a sacred artifact somewhere on the property. Could this be the reason for their imprisonment? Was the ghost of the curse protecting the burial ground? Or was there something more sinister at play? Determined to find out, he began to dig, moving the bricks until he felt something hard beneath the surface. With a grunt, he pried it loose and pulled it out. It was a small wooden box, ornately carved and locked. Hope surged through him. This could be the key to their freedom. But how could he open it? As he examined the box, he noticed a small indentation on the side, just big enough for a key. Could this be the keyhole? Carefully, he inserted the key and turned it. The box clicked open, revealing a pile of old documents and a strange pendant. Billy pulled the documents out one by one, his heart pounding. They were maps, each one leading to a different part of the property. Could the maps lead to the secret exit? Was this the key to their freedom? Or were they leading to something more dangerous? Eager to find out, he grabbed the map and headed out, leaving the box and pendant behind. Outside, the world was bright and beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue, the trees a lush green. But Billy's joy was short-lived. As he followed the map, he realized he was being watched. Someone was out there in the shadows, observing his every move. Who was it, and what did they want? Fear gnawed at him, but curiosity was stronger. Determined to find the answers he sought, Billy pressed on. But as he journeyed deeper into the wilderness, the forest grew darker and more menacing. The trees closed in around him, their branches twisting and turning like gnarled fingers. The air grew thick and heavy, and a sense of dread settled over him. Was he being led into a trap, or was the truth waiting for him just beyond the trees? Only time would tell.